Good evening, everyone out there. Good evening, Facebook and YouTube. How are you? It's Serene coming to you again from my Sweet Pea and Me. Happy Sunday. Uh, I hope everyone is doing great. So, um, I know I'm doing well. We have a 3-day weekend happening, and so we're just relaxing. And my boys, we got them. They're with family right now, so it's just myself and my husband and the little one, and so we are enjoying. It's really cool. Um, isn't it nice to have some place to send your children? It's beautiful. They're with in-laws. Um, but I wanted to talk about today's topic. It's inspired by something that happened this week. So the name of the topic is he or she, right? Depending on if you have a son or a daughter. He or she acts like a totally different person. Um, and let me tell you where this stemmed from. I recently went to my daughter's school. I'm a part of, her school has something called Core Parents, and it's like class parents, but basically it's parents that get together, from each of the classes, and when they have these special nights or um, these these evenings, just the core parents get together to talk about a specific topic that will be beneficial for them to learn so that they can carry back the information to the other parents in the class. So I went to this event, uh, and the the objective of the night was for us to get together in smaller groups. So they broke up the core parents into smaller groups, and they are in the process of getting ready to administer to all of the parents in the school an assessment. We got this assessment. It's an assessment for our children. This assessment was given out to all of the parents back in October, and now for March they're going to do the assessment again. And it happens twice a year. What it is that parents have to assess what they've been observing about their children, and then the teachers assess that same exact thing. And it's based off of a questionnaire that we get to that has different criteria or different benchmarks or different, yeah, I would say criteria of what to look for. And as I said, the parents look for it and they rate it, with saying like, I always see this with my child, I frequently see this, I sometimes see it, and it's different things. And I'll share what some of those things are tonight. So either way, we're in this group together and we're talking about the best way to talk to other parents about taking this assessment or conducting this assessment with their child. And so as I'm in this group, there are parents talking about or reflecting on, hi, there are parents talking about their experience when they did the first round of the assessments. And I had a couple of parents in the group who were saying, yeah, it was so interesting to do the assessment and then talk to the teacher who also conducted the same assessment, and to see that some of the things that the teacher said that they saw about their child was very different from what they experienced or what they observed with their own child. And it's interesting to me because I always hear that. And the parent said, oh my gosh, I felt like my teacher was telling me about a totally different child. Like, that wasn't my child that she was describing. And I've heard this before, right? So I've been doing this for a while. And it's so interesting when I hear parents, like when I used to be a teacher at Parent Teachers Conference, every now and then I get a parent who I'm telling you about your child, and the parent is sitting there like, whose child is this, right? And it could be for a behavior that was negative, or it could be for a behavior that was a positive behavior that I saw that the parent was just like, that's not my child. And I always found that to be really funny. Most of the time it's for the positive behavior. So we're telling the teacher, he or she does this, or he or she is so great at building, and you know, he or she loves to play in the sand table, and the parent is sitting there like, really, you know. And so that's what made me want to address this tonight and talk about it. And this is the same type of stuff that I talked to the parents in my group this past week about. So, you know, what things do I hear parents often say are different behaviors that they see, you know, or when they talk about their child where they're like, oh, different behaviors happen. Um, Sometimes I hear it from a dad who's like, when he's with his mom, he's a totally different child, right? Or I hear parents say, this was the way she was in school, but after school, you know, your teacher said that you were so like quiet and such, and then after school, you're totally different. Like energy is totally different. Or even she's extremely social, but here she's really not social at all. So that's two different children. I feel like that's two different children. Um, and so I wanted to really focus on just this assessment piece of it, and some of those criteria, which I'm actually going to share with you all. I wrote them down because some of these assessments, they have a lot of like really long questions. Um, and I'm not going to focus on the whole, you know, like the two different parents. When you're with dad, you're like this, and when you're like this, when you're with mom, because that's a different reason that tends to happen. Um, but for the purpose of this broadcast, you know, the assessment part of it, right? And so someone just commented and said that they feel like he feels like they're not actually. It's my husband who commented and said, you know, that parents are not tapping into their child enough. And so that's what I wound up telling the mom, not in those words, because I didn't want to tell her. First of all, I was there wearing my mom hat. I wasn't there as an educator. But I said to her, you know, well, you need to assess what the setting looks like. You know, what that setting is. So the school setting looks like this, right? At my daughter's school, the children are allowed to be really, really free, really exploring. They're able to walk around the class as if it's their own world, and they're navigating in it, and they're navigating in it with their friends, and they're moving around in a certain way. And so if the home doesn't parallel with that, then there are going to be certain things that you don't see. And so it's different factors. And case in point, I'll tell you my own story and experience when my daughter was, we did the assessment last year. She was at the same school. This was when she was with the Threes program. I had marked it and said that she works really well with friends, that she's able to play really nicely and well with friends, right? Based off of one of the questions on the assessment. Well, when we went for the parent teachers conference and the teacher took out her same questionnaire, she wrote that that's an area of need for our daughter, like that was not actually a strong point. And I kind of was shocked. I was one of those parents where I was like, really? She plays so well. You know, I feel like she plays really well and codependently, or you know, with children. And I had to really take a step back and realize that when I was referring to that, I'm thinking about her playing with her brothers, right? So she was 3 at that time. Her brothers were like 11 and 14. And they play really well with one another, especially her and the 11-year-old at that time. You know, I watched them pretend to do things and pretend play and play with our sand table and play with Play-Doh and whatever together. But the teacher's experience of her was that she really likes to play more independently, and if she likes, and when she does play with others, she gets very frustrated if they're not doing what she says to do, and so she opts to play by herself a lot when people are not listening to her. She's bossy, that's what that means, but her teacher is not going to say that. She can't say that. So, but that's exactly what she means. So I had to really think about, you know, is that what I'm seeing as well at home, or why am I not seeing it the same way? And the reason being is because when she's playing with her brothers, um, she is being, there's potential to be bossy in it, but they kind of go with her ideas, right? So she's the little one, and so they tend to just go with what her ideas are. And so she's used to that. And so when she takes it back to the other setting, and other 3-year-olds are playing with her, it doesn't fly like that so easily. They're not letting her have her way. And so that that environmental factor, or that factor at my home, that setup factor, made me not be able to see the same thing that the teacher was seeing. And so I wanted to just share with you some of the assessments. So at her school, they use an assessment called it's a long name, the Devereaux Early Childhood Assessment for Preschoolers, better known as the DECA. And you can Google these things, you can find those assessments. I mean, to be able to unlock the actual questions of the assessment, you usually have to pay for that package. You can't just get the questions right online. But you can read a little bit about it. So for today's purpose, I am going to actually talk about the DECA assessment, and I'm also going to talk about another popular one, which is called Ages and Stages. The Ages and Stages questionnaire, or rather ASQ 3, not rather, but in short, it's ASQ 3. Another one that you could also find online, but you won't be able to find the questions. You can just find information about it. So in the DECA, one of the questions that they asked was, how frequently or how often does your child have a short attention span? And I picked that one in particular because at home, we know that our daughter has a very long attention span based off of whatever it is that she's being put in front of, right? That typically happens with children. So when she's playing in her sand table, and I keep saying sand table because right now she's upstairs playing in her sand table, so that's what's in my head. She can do that for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, right? She will bring different things, like even right now as I speak, I had to tell her before I came down to broadcast, I had to tell her, stop pulling some of our kitchen equipment into your sand table. Like, that's nasty, we don't do that. But she had measuring cups and spoons and a funnel and a big baster, and she's pulling these things to incorporate into her sand table. And when she does that, her play becomes even more engaging. And so her attention span she has a long attention span. When she's coloring, when she's drawing, when she's using the stapler and doing artwork and cutting and things like that, she can sit there for a really long time. And so when we came up to that question of her attention span, her teacher was able to speak to the fact that, yep, she has a very long attention span. Why? Because her classroom is set up very similarly to our home, or rather there's some factors in our home that are similar to what's in the school. And so I'm able to really, when we're assessing, it's very accurate of the oh my gosh, there's a word, it's a science word. There's a similarity, right? That's what it means. So we're assessing based off of the same criteria. There's a constant variable. There's a constant there. And so same assessment. But I think about the parents who say, no, his attention span is super short, or her attention span, they don't have any kind of attention span. Well, I want to, speak to that with parents. What are you sitting your child in front of? What is in front of your child, right? So if they are exposed to a lot of TV, a lot of tablets, a lot of, those types of things where you don't really need to have a long attention span for really, this short video or this short little YouTube clip or whatever, then they sit there, and then when it's over, they're moving, they're gone, or if they're just sitting there constantly in front of that, and that becomes their norm to do, which is sit in front of a tablet, you might say that they have a long attention span because they are sitting there in front of that tablet for 2 hours, right? But then when they go into school, their attention span is not as long because they're not getting the same kind of stimuli. It's a different type of stimulant that you're putting them in front of. So when the teacher is saying you have to sit here and write and use certain skills like muscle skills or fine motor skills, or comprehension skills, or creative thinking skills, they might not have the attention span to do that, and so your teacher might mark them as not having a really long attention span at all. Why? Because just like I said, right, the tablets contain many apps, and so there's always something to press. There's always something to move on to, right? You're done with this, you move to that. You're done with this, you move to that, right? So you can also, that's having a short attention span with it, or once again having a long attention span because you're just sitting there constantly doing that, and to the parent you're like, yep, he's sitting there for a long time, that's holding his attention, right? But either way, it's a contradicting thing from whatever the teacher is seeing because it's not the same kind of stimulus that's coming in, right? So when you speak to the teacher and they tell you this information, you have to ask more questions to understand, well, what is it that you are putting my daughter or my son in front of that is either holding their attention or not holding their attention, and then you have to kind of do some assessing yourself of how is that similar or different to what I am sitting them in front of. Another question on the DECA was, how often do they share with other children? Well, and then it's actually in the circle that I was with the parents, we got into this conversation because a parent was saying, oh, no, she doesn't really share with anybody, she doesn't like to share. Well, then your teacher might say she likes to share, or she shares really, really well, she does a really great job of it, or she cooperatively plays very often. My question to you is, how often are they with other children, right? So if you have a child who's the only child that when they get in their home, every toy that's there belongs to them, they don't have to share, you don't engage in the play with them to call them to have to share, because there's definitely a way to do that, right? Even if you have an only child, if you're sitting down and you're playing with them and you step into that role of being a child, where you have to say, oh, can I get that? Or can I have that? Or it's my turn with that. Then it really calls them to have to do that because you're engaging with them in that way. But if they're just sitting, alone in the house, or sitting there in the house and they're playing with the toy, and anything they want to go and grab and get, they can get it because it's all theirs. Well, then yes, when you get them into the classroom where there's tons of children, you might get the situation where it's the teacher saying that they're not able to navigate with 10 other children in the classroom, or 11 other children in the classroom. They're not able to share well. They're having a hard time. They're keeping all the toys to themselves because that's what they have at home, right? And so a really helpful tip to help the child to be able to share more, or to be in those social situations where it calls for them to do that. One is, like I said, play with them or engage or interact with them. But the other thing is set up situations where they're with other children, right? Birthday parties, family gatherings, play dates, invite other children to your home so that they can sit in those social settings. Museums, right? Children's museums always have situations, and it's a great context for you to be able to have play spaces, right? The Children's Museum, I know here in the city, has this, has a huge area for the children to, play with different things. And so they have to take turns. They have to do that. And so you can put yourself and your child in specific situations that will call them to do that, because those things take practice, right? If they're never exposed to other children except for in the school setting, they're not getting as much practice as they probably can get, right? So that was a question off of the DECA, right? The Devereaux Early Childhood Assessment for Preschoolers. So that was, I gave 2 examples of questions from there. Then I've had, hey, how are you? Then I am, briefly speaking about the Ages and Stages questionnaire, right? So Ages and Stages, ASQ3, is another type of child assessment There are so many assessments. Even if you're taking your child to the pediatrician, right? The pediatrician usually gives like an assessment of just some benchmarks, like can your child dress themselves, can they put toothpaste on a toothbrush, are they able to turn a doorknob, like different doctor forms would say different things for you to start to look at. Able to tie their shoe, not at 3 years old, but as they get older, the doctors will give questionnaires so that you can look for what is perceived as developmentally appropriate, or what is deemed as developmentally appropriate for your child to be able to do. So in the ages and stages questionnaire, one of the questions is, does your child catch a ball with both hands? And I know that that's actually on a doctor's form that I've seen before. Well, once again, are you giving them opportunities to catch a ball with both hands, to be able to assess that properly, right? Funny, but kind of not funny, right? I have had teachers that work with me, none of my teachers now, that when it's time to assess the children, if they've never exposed their students to it, right before assessment time comes, they start setting up scenarios to test that stuff out, to see if a child can do that. So they'll tell the child, come, and they'll throw a ball in their hand. Okay, good, he could catch it. Check, right? If you're a teacher out there and you're looking at that, don't do that. Don't do that. You're testing a child. That's terrible. You're supposed to be able, what you really should do is have constant times and settings where that's happening, where you're making space for that during the day. When they're in the play space and when they're outside in the playground, they should have exposure to those things so that at assessment time, you're not testing those things out at the last minute. But parents too, right? If you expose them to it constantly, then you'll know the answer to that question when you see it. Taking them out to the playground yourself and doing those things to allow them to have that exposure. Another question on the ages and stages questionnaire is, does your child dress up and play, act, pretending to be someone or something else? Once again, right? The great thing about children, though, is they will pretend whether you expose them to materials or not, right? They'll use things to pretend and reenact the things that they see. So that one is actually a little easy to determine. They'll turn a remote control into a cell phone in a heartbeat, or into a hammer or something. They'll pretend play anyway, so you'll get to see that. But in a school setting, they're definitely exposed, or they should be, right? Depending on how your preschool or your early childhood center is set up, they should be exposed to things that allow them to engage in dramatic play, because any early childhood educator should know that dramatic play is how you definitely learn a lot about the child. You learn a lot about what they're exposed to based on how they reenact it, right? And what they do, and the different scenarios that they're reenacting. So you get to see that. But, bring some dramatic play stuff into your home. I put a picture up this week on Instagram at my daughter's school where the children in the dramatic play center, which is also right now set up to be like a restaurant, the children are using real knives to cut real food, to serve in real glass dishes that they use, and they serve it to their friends, and their friends write their order on a little notepad like a real waitress or waiter. And this is their dramatic play center. So of course, those things are easy to set up, right? A butter knife, people have that in their homes, right? You can get them 99-cent store plastic butter knives, let them cut some real fruit. Strawberries are always easy to cut. Bananas. Allow them to engage with those things to see how they kind of just play with them, because that's what in a early childhood setting they should be experiencing. So when you get a question like, does your child reenact and play and pretend to do something else, to be someone else and something else, you'll really have an accurate depiction of whether they do or not, because you've set up your setting like that. And so, to wrap this up, wrap this topic up, what are some of the things that parents can do to be able to answer these questions more accurately? Exposure, right? You can even get these questions, like I said, you can find some of them online, but just based off of your pediatrician or your teachers, they should have some of the assessment. You can even ask them what are some of the things that they're looking for, and you can get those notes so that you can know what things you might want to expose your child to. The other thing is that parents can do research, right? You can Google any type of question that says something, to the effect of, what should a 3-year-old, what's developmentally appropriate for my 3-year-old to be doing at this point. And you'll get a whole list that they should be doing, catching the ball. They should be able to hold a pencil or pen with a tripod grasp. They should be able to recognize and say some letters of the alphabet. They should be able to count up to a certain amount of numbers. Count up to a certain amount. If you know that these are the things, then you can further research, how can I expose my child to those things so that they can meet those assessment points, that they can be on par or up to par developmentally as per what it says that they should be able to do. So your research. And then the last thing that parents should always do, communicate with your child's teacher. So when my daughter's teacher told me that she doesn't play, as well with friends as I thought she did, I had to ask the questions of, well, what is she doing then? Because I thought I saw her doing this at home, but, what is she doing? How does it look? And she had to tell me, she'll be playing over here, and then when a child comes over to play with her, she kind of turns the other way, and she'll go play over there and remove herself from where they are. And so I was like, oh, okay. And then I have to ask, what do you do to encourage her to play? And so I have to get those words from the teacher so that the teacher can then teach me, right, what that should look like. And it tells me, gotta have more play dates, right? Gotta have more children her age work with her. And I did. And I got to see the same exact stuff. Her be like, she's like, okay, friend is over. You go play over there. I'll play over here. And I have to start bringing that together, bringing them together a little better to show her, no, let's figure out how to play together. And we work on that. But that would not have ever occurred to me to work on unless I had that conversation with the teacher, which was sparked based off of my assessment and her assessment looking very different from one another, right? So, in short, your child is not two different people, right? What it is they may be in two different settings, two different factors, or various different factors that trigger what looks like 2 different or 3 different responses to certain stimuli. So, that's pretty much it. I hope that this was helpful. I will see you next Sunday. Tune in and send me any emails. I can be found on earlychildhood@sweetpeame.com, earlychildhood@sweetpeame.com. You can send me an email and ask any questions or give suggestions for topics. All right? Take care. Talk to you. Have a great week.